This is a macroeconomics course final video. This video is an analysis of the current state of the Mexican economy based on data from the past recent years. This is done by Federico Serrano and Rodrigo de Leon. The two graphs presented ahead are a comparison of economic growth per year from 1994 to 2016. The current prices graph is done with nominal GDP, which is not adjusted to inflation. And the 2013 prices graph is with the real GDP, since it is adjusted to inflation each year. These are the conclusions that can be drawn from this data. In 1996, Mexico had the highest economic growth up to date, whilst in 2009 it had the lowest. We can see a tendency for the economic growth to decrease with the years. So, with a few exceptions, the economic growth is going downwards. As hinted before, real GDP and nominal GDP are not the same. Nominal GDP does not take into account inflation throughout the years, while real GDP does. Since economic growth has a downward tendency, can it be said that Mexico is going through a recession? Strictly speaking, no. Mexico is not having a recession. Our GDP had a growth of 2.1% last year. There are complaints in our economy, mostly because of the high percentage of poor people and the difference between higher and lower classes. But strictly speaking, Mexico is not undergoing a recession. The Green Gross Domestic Product, or Green GDP, is an index of economic growth with the environmental consequences of that growth factored into a country's conventional GDP. The Green GDP does not include all of the factors available for measuring the market value. It focuses strictly on the environmental consequences. This is why it is lower than the regular calculations. Even if Mexico had higher economic growth, our green GDP would still be low, as Mexico is a highly polluted country. This chart represents the three components of investment in Mexico as of 2016. With a 43%, construction represents the largest component of investment for the Mexican economy. Then it is followed by machinery and imported machinery. There is a fourth component of investment that is not present in the INEGI stats. It is human capital formation. Human capital formation is the process of acquiring and increasing the number of persons who have the skills, education, and experience which are critical for the economic and political development of a country. The two graphs presented ahead are from imports and exports from 1994 to 2016, containing both the Mexican exports and imports at current pesos. Is Mexico having a trade deficit or surplus? Since 2013, Mexico is having a trade deficit. The ideal scenario would be Mexico exporting more than imports, but right now, it goes the other way around. Why do these two graphs seem to move the same way? Well, the answer is pretty simple. A high level of imports indicates a robust domestic demand and a growing economy that will improve productivity over the long run. A healthy economy is one where both exports and imports are growing. This typically indicates economic growth and a sustainable trade surplus or deficit. Now we will move to the topic of unemployment in Mexico. This first graph represents total unemployment from 1994 to 2016. As it can be seen, its lowest point was in 2016 with a 3.1 unemployment rate, while its highest point was reached in 2011 with a 5.2 unemployment rate. This second graph is still of unemployment, but it compares women's unemployment versus men's unemployment. As it can be seen, both lines are very close, but generally, women suffer more from unemployment. Mexico's economy is slowly but surely regaining traction. It is still recovering from a 2008 crisis. Back then, our GDP was 8%. It currently is 2.1%, though we believe that it will increase throughout the years. Although we believe that GDP will increase, we recognize the high levels of poverty that still exist. So we think that social and anti-poverty programs must be reviewed, created, and sustained throughout the years. Fiscal performance is improving. This limits the growth of debt and keeps financial costs low. As it was seen in exports versus imports, exports are growing, and foreign direct investment is growing every day. All around the country, new facilities of foreign investment are being installed. Banco de Mexico has done a great job controlling interest rates and inflations. Mexico's economy is in a good place right now. It is definitely not in an optimal place, but we firmly believe that the conditions are optimal for prominent economic growth in the next coming years. As said before, we believe that the Mexican economy will continue to grow. More specifically, we think that the GDP will continue to grow above 2% in 2018, and it will hold that way for 2018. Although the pace is good, it is still not good enough to eliminate problems as unemployment in Mexico. As of today, Andrés Manuel López Obrador and Ricardo Anaya are the most important candidates for the Mexican presidential run of 2018. José Antonio Meade is also in the mix amongst with some individual candidates, but we do not consider that any of them are going to win. We believe that the real race is between Anaya and AMLO. So we think that if AMLO is elected president, foreign direct investment will reduce, as he does not produce confidence in foreign investors. All the while, we think that Ricardo Anaya will definitely produce confidence among foreign investors, and FDIs will either stay the same or maybe even increase. Based on what AMLO has said on different interviews and debates, he will push for Mexicans to consume Mexican products. For example, he does not want to import any more American corn. So we think that if he renegotiates NAFTA, he will push for a less aggressive deal. He will push for less imports and less exports because he wants most of what's produced in Mexico to be consumed by Mexicans. On the other side, we have Anaya, and we think that he will push for a NAFTA renegotiation that keeps the same terms, because he has repeatedly said that our relationship with US and Canada are primordial for a good economic growth in Mexico. This uncertainty has taken a toll on the Mexican economy. As the peso keeps depreciating every day against the dollar, we will have to wait until July 1st to start seeing the real effects of the 2018 Mexican presidential election.
Running circles around my mind. Even when it's raining, all you ever do is